it was because of our extreme dysfunction.
Yeah.
We were so, it just wasn't good. It was just so dysfunctional. And I was also very old for my age. I had gone to work when I was 13 years old. I had
Yeah.
gotten a job. And, when you're a child of abuse or child of an alcoholic, frequently you're the adult. You end
Yeah.
up being the adult. And so I
Mhm.
knew how to adult pretty well from
Yeah.
a very young age. It's kind of that survival and take care of things. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
was pretty good at that. And so I ended up dropping out of high school in 10th grade. And I walked down or I drove down to the GED office, got my GED. It wasn't even difficult for me. I just passed it. But right before I did that, I had talked to my high school counselor, and they said, don't drop out of high school. You'll never amount to anything if you do this. This is a horrible idea. But I did it anyway. So those thoughts were always in my head. My father told me that I was a bad person. He spanked me slash beat me on a regular basis. And then I had school telling me that I was never going to amount to anything. So I had these lots of different areas in my life. I lived in government housing.
Mhm.
So kind of everything was pointing to, you're kind of a loser and
Yeah.
you're not going
Yeah.
to do anything.
Hey everyone, let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison and welcome to episode 78 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. I have a wonderful guest for you today. Diana Buckwalter is a nurse midwife in Denver, Colorado. And we just had a really fun conversation. She talks about so many things. She is another author in the Kate Butler Inspired Impact book series. And she has a chapter in the book Women Who Shine. Her chapter is called Abandon, Fear, and Engage. And in her chapter, Diana talks about how she grew up in a household where she endured sexual abuse, physical abuse, violence. Not only Diana, but her mother and as well. And one night when her father was asleep, her mother gathered up Diana and her younger sister, and they fled the house and never came back. And she talks about just the effects of going through the abuse that she went through, and really how, as a young adult, she was able to carve out a new path for herself. But she got married for the first time at the age of 15. And there's so many remarkable things in her life. And we talk about that. We talk about her experiences as a midwife and the spirituality around that type of service. And we also touch on women's sexuality and women losing their sex drive. We just run the gamut while weaving in her spirituality. It was such a fun conversation and a joy to talk to Diana. Before you meet her, I want to invite you to subscribe to the podcast. Let your friends know that they can listen on traditional platforms, and also send me an email. Let me know what you think about our guests, and if there's someone that you recommend that I bring on the podcast. You can reach me at Let's Start Healing Podcast at gmail.com. So let's meet Diana. Let's get started, and let's start healing. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have you here. So you are in Denver, Colorado.
Yes, ma'am.
So you have a chapter in the Kate Butler book, Women Who Shine. Can you share what the chapter is about?
Yes. So the way that I met Kate was through my daughter is a next door neighbor to someone who was in a prior book of Kate's. And she told me about this book about women who empower. And she was telling me all about it and her story. And I thought, wow, I have got a story that, that I kind of keep to myself. I've never really shared it with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But as I look around in the world today, I see so many women who are still in 2021, still oppressed, still kind of beaten down by the world and by society. And I thought, I would just love to share my story of my life, just to, if it can possibly inspire or help other women. So my chapter is about being born in the South in Texas. I was
Mm-hmm.
a little girl in the 60s. And back then, you're much too young to know about this, but
No, thank you, but that's not true.
oh. Well, in the 60s in Texas, men were kind of the supreme ones. They owned their families, they owned
Mm-hmm.
their children. Women could not own uh, cars in their name. They couldn't own a house in their name. They couldn't have a credit card. I mean, women and children were really kind of
Yeah.
underneath men.
Mm-hmm.
And so my father, like a lot of men that are abusive men, on the outside of our house, everybody thought he was a wonderful guy, got along with everybody, super good. No one would ever have believed what went on, once he came inside the house and closed the door.
Yeah.
He was a very violent and abusive alcoholic, and really kind of beat my mom down really badly so that she couldn't really stand up for herself or
Mm-hmm.
for me and my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lived under those conditions for many, many years, from the time I was a little girl until my mom got us out of there when I was about 10 or 11 years old.
Was he physically and emotionally abusive or emotionally abusive
He was all of
mostly?
it. You
Wow.
mentioned the word abuse. We were sexually abused, physically abused,
Oh my.
mentally abused, emotionally abused, the whole thing. We were just really scared I lived in fear all
Mm-hmm.
the time. I was afraid I was going to get hurt. I was afraid my mother was going to get hurt, or that she was going to be killed because he would throw things. And I mean, it was violent, and it was very dramatic.
Wow. And is your sister younger or older?
She's about 3.5 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm. And then your mom, did she leave with you and your sister? Did you say
Yeah.
around 11?
Yeah, when I was around 10 or 11, we snuck out in the night when he was passed out
Mm-hmm.
from drinking. And she gathered us together, and we snuck out of the house and drove away. And it's a miracle that we even survived, because again, women also didn't make very much money. And so
Right.
we were able to qualify for federal housing, federal government housing. And so we kind of entered that world.
Where
And
did she go that night that you left?
we actually went to my father's grandmother's home and kind of just stayed there for a couple of days. We had all these relatives, but nobody would stand up. Nobody would, it was so different back then than it is now.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there's all these checkpoints in place, women's shelters, I mean,
Yeah.
relatives that will stand up for you. But back then, that just was not a thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering about how did she cope after that? What was life like once you found a place to live? What was it like for all three of you? Because, you're traumatized
We
at
were
that point.
so traumatized. In fact, we were so traumatized. For example, my mom would have to sit by my sister's bed every single night so that she could go to sleep, because my sister would have such terrible nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to be a person, for some reason, and I don't know why this is, but I could dissociate better. I could, disappear better. I could, get out of my, fear a little bit easier, but my sister couldn't. And I think my mom sitting by her bed every single night, it impacted me. My sister could not go to sleep at night without my mom sitting right next to her bed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really hard. I mean, my mom ended up working for an airline, making reservations.
Mm-hmm.
And, she made okay money. We didn't ever have any extra, zero extra.
Like through
Um,
high school?
oh yeah, it was, it
Mm-hmm.
was, it was really, really hard.
Did they just divorce? Did he try to find you?
They divorced, and we really didn't see him. Of course, he never paid child support ever. That's the story for many women, right? Many
Yeah.
women get divorced or their partner leaves. They never see a dime from those
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what happens with their thought process, but they have no support. I think my mom kind of didn't want him in the picture anyway. So even though she needed
Mhm.
his money, I think she was like, just stay away because you're such a bad person. Yeah.
So are you writing about in your chapter how it affected you as, you grew up just in terms of socializing with other people or men and
Yes, yes, yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And there were so many things to overcome. There were
Yeah.
so many things to overcome. And so one of the things that happened to me is when I was 14 years old, I met a boy.
Uh-huh.
And many times as teenage girls, when you are, especially coming from that kind of a background, I found a boyfriend and I found drugs. And you mix the boyfriend and the drugs, and all the pain starts to kind of disseminate and go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pretty involved in that for about 3 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I ended up marrying him when I was only 15 years old.
How old was he?
He was 18. And
Wow.
so we got married so that I could kind of escape. I needed an escape. So I escaped with him. But in the middle of all this, I would do these different drugs. I never knew what I was doing.
Were you what kind of drugs were you doing?
Whatever was on the table. Whatever was on the table is what I was doing. And I write about a part of my life where I had done these, snorted lines of white powder, not sure
Mm-hmm.
exactly what they were.
Yeah.
And 36 hours later, I woke up. I mean, I had lost 36 hours of my life. I have no idea what happened. And I just had this very distinct voice in my mind that said, stop doing this. This is destructive behavior. This is not your destiny. Stop. A big stop. And
Mm-hmm.
after that, I listened and I stopped.
Wow. So it was just that simple. Well, first of all, did you have to get your mom's permission to get married? How did you all?
I did, and she gave it. And why, you might ask, would she give permission for a 15-year-old? It was because of our extreme dysfunction.
Yeah.
We were so, it just wasn't good. It was just so dysfunctional. And I was also very old for my age. I had gone to work when I was 13 years old. I had
Yeah.
gotten a job. And, when you're a child of abuse or child of an alcoholic, frequently you're the adult. You end
Yeah.
up being the adult. And so I
Mhm.
knew how to adult pretty well from
Yeah.
a very young age. It's kind of that survival and take care of things. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
was pretty good at that. And so I ended up dropping out of high school in 10th grade. And I I drove down to the GED office, got my GED. It wasn't even difficult for me. I just passed it. But right before I did that, I had talked to my high school counselor, and they said, don't drop out of high school. You'll never amount to anything if you do this. This is a horrible idea. But I did it anyway. So those thoughts were always in my head. My father told me that I was a bad person. He spanked me slash beat me on a regular basis. And then I had school telling me that I was never going to amount to anything. So I had these lots of different areas in my life. I lived in government housing.
Mhm.
So kind of everything was pointing to, you're kind of a loser and
Yeah.
you're not going
Yeah.
to do anything.
I keep wanting to say, how long did you stay married? But maybe you're still married to the person you married.
Yeah, no, no. So I was married to him for about 3-ish years,
Mhm.
and we had a daughter together. And one night I was driving to work, very, very pregnant. I was about 8.5 months pregnant. I was driving to work. I worked in a hospital, and I worked the 11 to 7 shift,
Mhm.
and pulled up in the gas station to get some gas. And there he was in a car with his arm around some other girl. And it was a huge wake up call for me. And I thought, well, I'm not going to repeat anything that my mother went through. So that was kind of, my
Yeah.
wake up call to say, this isn't going to go anywhere. So,
Yeah.
we ended up separating and getting a divorce.
Well, I should say alcoholism is prevalent in my family. It was prevalent, as I was growing up. But it was dysfunctional for sure. I didn't experience abuse, but, it definitely shaped my life in terms of what I accepted and what I didn't accept. And I had to undo a lot of things as an adult. And so I'm just curious about you. And one thing is, you seem like you really pay attention, which we don't always do. Like, you pay attention, and maybe you're in a situation, but like you said, when you woke up after that 36 hours, you heard a voice, did you say? Or when you saw your husband in the car, some people might feel like, oh, I love him, or I'm having his baby, or something like that. But that wasn't you. You were like, you shifted immediately. So you seem like there's something in you that's a good signal.
You summed it up very, very well. And I think, I believe that I've always had angels with me. I feel like I've always been watched over, and there's something in me that you're exactly right. When I saw that situation, I was sad and I was devastated.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've always had the ability to look ahead,
Yeah.
to think about my future instead of right now. And I was having a baby, I was having a little baby girl, and I thought about how I'd spent my life, and I was like, I am not going to repeat anything that I
Yeah.
had grown up with. And if he's going to do this at this point where he's about to have a child with me, then there's no more chance. There's no more second chance. I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, wow, I can't even believe it.
Well, what was the dynamic like as you moved into your 20s and older with your mom and your sister and you? Because, you each have, your own coping skills. Were you close? And did you go to like AA meetings or Al Anon meetings or other types of support groups or therapy to try to work through things?
So we definitely could not afford any therapy. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we even knew about AA back then. So this was,
Yeah.
yeah, and yes, we were close. My
Uh-huh.
mom and I were really close for a long time. My sister had a lot of struggles because of all the abuse. We kind of handled it two different ways.
Yeah.
And, drug abuse and alcohol abuse and abuse, it just really can destroy families on so many levels. And boy, you have to fight really, really hard to make sense of your life and make sense of what has happened to you, and
Mm-hmm.
try so hard to just stay positive and focused on the future. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about when you mentioned women and how women were not empowered, in the late 60s or in early 70s. I mean, they were. I mean, my mom worked, but then they weren't by society as a whole. As you were saying that, I was thinking about where we are today, but I was listening to some podcast, and they were mentioning in New York the Long Island Lolita. Do you remember that story? And I can't remember the guy's name. If I said his name, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But he was having an affair, and he was having it with the Long Island Lolita, and she was 16. This was in the 90s.
Oh,
And so
wow.
she was on the front page of, the tabloids in New York. I was living in New York at the time. She was on the front page all the time, and she was, ostracized and, just disparaged and all this stuff. But I mean, she was 16. And I know at the time, I'm not even thinking of it that way,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Well, and I mean, our society has a lot of judgment around all kinds of things when it comes to women.
Mm-hmm.
You have to walk this certain line not to have a certain kind of a judgment. But I mean, who knows what her
Yeah,
life was like that she was doing that at 16 years old. I mean,
exactly.
I was doing some pretty,
Yeah.
I mean, when you're abused, especially with sexual abuse, when you're sexually abused as a child, you become promiscuous.
Yep.
And it seems like it would be the opposite. Like you wouldn't want to have anything to do with it because you've been so traumatized, but that's not the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially, with the dad, and I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but it's not uncommon to turn to someone who maybe has some traits like our dads.
Well, and I think girls want love. They
Yeah,
want to be loved. And
exactly.
so to get love from a boy when you're a teenager, you
Mm-hmm.
have to give sex. You have to give all that stuff.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Because
so
your emotional mind is so immature.
yeah,
You mentally you might be thinking this isn't a good idea, but your emotional mind is like, I really need to be loved. I really
right.
need love.
Yeah, and that's so true. That's so true. And did that play a role at all in you becoming a nurse and becoming a midwife? Has that played a role in your journey?
Well, that journey, there's a lot of space between that and that journey. But what happened was I ended up marrying the husband that I've been married to now for about 44 years.
Uh-huh.
And he got really sick when we were early married. And I actually had 7 children. And
Wow.
after I had my fifth
Oh
child,
my.
I
I love
know,
that.
I know.
I love that.
I know,
So
it's
old
something.
school.
Yeah, old school is right. Totally old school. But after I had my fifth child, my husband was so ill that I thought he was going to die.
Mm.
And so I thought, what am I going to do to support these children that I've had if something happens to my husband? And that was kind of my start to my education. And I write in my chapter about sitting outside of the community college in my car, frozen, because I had so much anxiety about going inside of a big school while everybody's so smart and everybody looks
Mm.
studious,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I don't belong here, and all those voices in my head were saying you don't belong here. And I finally had enough courage to get up and go in. And it took, anyway, there's a lot of story there, but
This is for college, right? Where
yes.
did you go to college?
So I started in a little community college in Denver, Colorado,
Uh-huh.
and I went there and got my associate degree and then went on to get my bachelor's degree. But all of that took me 8 years. It took
Mm.
me 8 years from the time I hit that door to the
Yeah.
time I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And yeah, it was a lot. There's a million stories in that story, but
Well, actually, I want to rewind for a second because I'm curious how you met your husband and what that was like.
so I had my little sweet baby girl, and we had moved with my mother from one state to another state. My mother was very religious, and she kept promising me, she would say, Diana, if you will just choose the right and do what the Lord wants you to do and be in the right places at the right time, God will bless you to find somebody that, will be your partner in life. And she would say this to me a lot. And I was like, oh, okay, okay. And so anyway, we met at a church activity, and that's how we ended up meeting. And she was
Oh.
like, I told you, if you're just in the right places, you're going
Right.
to meet the right man. And I was like, okay.
Was it, just going back to everything you had been through, did you feel safe with him right away? Was it a process?
A huge process. And it's another great question, because it actually took me, when you grow up like that, I really had no trust of anybody, like, ever.
Hmm.
So to say I had trust issues was, kind of an understatement. But he was a great guy, and he did so many wonderful things, and I looked up to him and I had faith in him. We struggled for a long time, just, I don't know. I had never had a mentor, how to be married, how to be a wife, how to make
Yeah.
it all work right. So, we went through a lot of years of trying to figure all that stuff out. And because of my sexual abuse, I definitely had years of trying to, work through that and telling myself everything is safe, everything's fine, it's cool.
Hmm.
That takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got through it.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely did. We definitely did. We're still married. We have lots of grandchildren, lots of kids. Yeah, life is busy.
So, as a midwife, you have 7 kids. I mean, tell me about being a midwife. Didn't any of this play a role? And because I just think of a midwife, it's actually something I've thought I wanted to do. I just think of it as just being so just giving, and you're just in such a space of of love.
That is a great statement because it's very spiritual and it is very loving. And, what better in this world than to usher in all these little babies?
Yeah.
It's pure love, it's pure calm, it's pure peace. And I'm pretty sure that I, came with this talent, this ability, and I just kind of discovered it along the way. And because of my abuse with oppression with women, I am very much into empowering women, and so much of that empowerment through birth is a result of what women have gone through for many years, which is a lot of women have very traumatizing birth. And back in the 70s, there were very it was actually really terrible the way women had babies. They would give them these injections of medication that kind of made them go crazy, and they would strap them down and pull babies out with forceps. And I mean, it was pretty intense. And I thought, how can something that should be so incredibly spiritual be turned into such a disaster?
Right.
And so that kind of put me on the road to becoming a nurse. And then after I became a nurse, I went on to get my master's degree as a nurse practitioner and a nurse midwife. And, that's been my whole career, is working with women and helping them with all their GYN issues, all their women's health issues, lots of pregnancy, lots of babies. I've built birth centers, where people, don't have epidurals and they have water birth. And I've been really lucky to be very steeped in, like you said, the love of birth.
Right, right. Do you have an opportunity to have many women of color as your patients? Because of, I'm thinking about just, the mortality rate for Black women.
Yes.
And dying while giving childbirth. And so I was just curious if you know anything about that, if you could speak to that at all, or if you have an opportunity, to have patients who are women of color.
Yes, absolutely. I've delivered lots and lots of absolutely beautiful, gorgeous Black babies, lots and lots. And they are so beautiful with all their hair and all their cuteness. But you're right about that. African-American people in general are more prone to high blood pressure. And then you add pregnancy on top of that. And then you have things like preeclampsia and, lots of complications that if they're not getting prenatal care, then they have all these different complications and so forth. And so, yes, I've absolutely been involved in that. And Adrienne, I think if you would like to be a midwife, I'm all up for you. I think that would be fantastic. You should totally do it.
I don't know if I'm astute enough for the medical side of it.
Well, we need you. We need you in our profession. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I'm curious what you think God or your higher power calls you to do for yourself and for others through your work.
I think that women need to be listened to and they need to be heard. And I'm a really good listener. And I think part of, you can always look at the good and the bad of everything you go through, right? And one of the things about going through lots of abuse is you learn to kind of disappear and be quiet. So I'm really good at being quiet and listening to people.
You're observant.
I'm really good at it. And whenever a woman comes in to see me, I always start out with, how are you doing? Catch me up with your last year. What's going on? And frequently those women have tears. There's tears because women don't have very many people to listen, and they have, and they carry so many burdens, and it's such a stressful time to live. And so I love being able to listen to them. And then there's women who are pregnant that, they want a certain type of birth. And I feel I just kind of have another kind of a sense of how to get these babies into the world so that mom has a great experience. Dad, if there's one, has a great experience, and baby has a great experience. It's just, I don't know. I kind of came to the world with this ability to, kind of facilitate all that stuff. And I love it. And I love women. I love how resilient they are. And that's why I kind of wanted to do this book to say, hey, you can start in a bad place, and through education, because I am a believer of education. I think education gets women out of all kinds of bad things. And
Mm-hmm.
all these countries where they hold women back and they don't let them get educated. As soon as you educate women, everybody does better.
Right.
Everybody does better. So you can be the one person in your family that actually goes to college or finishes high school, even
Mm-hmm.
finishes high school or goes to a community college. But that energy starts to spread
Yeah.
amongst everybody around you. Your whole family
Yeah.
starts to change. So I think with my higher power, God, Jesus Christ, angels,
Right.
whoever, I mean, I have been really blessed to make a lot of strides forward from where I've come from, for
Yeah.
sure.
And how would you describe your relationship with God or your knowing of God?
I think when I look outside and see the beautiful world that we live in, when I'm in a birth and I was just in one last night. It was in the middle of the night, and you see this little person come into the world.
Mm.
And you see the happiness on the mom's face, and how excited she is to love this new little person, and going to the ocean, or how can you not know that there is somebody a lot bigger than you in charge of what's going on in the world?
Right, right, right.
And the miracles, right? There's so many miracles that happen all the time.
Hmm.
And I'm a huge believer in acknowledging those miracles and thanking God for those miracles, because they just keep on coming.
Right. And speaking of, I mean, is there a miracle or blessing that you can think of where you just said, this was all God that occurred in your life outside of your work? Or maybe it is within your work where you said, I had nothing to do with this. This was completely God.
So many, so many things. I can tell you about an experience. I mean, I could tell you lots of patient experiences, but I can tell you an experience. One time back in 2010, there was a recession, right? There was a recession back then.
Yeah.
And my husband builds houses. And because I came from, a poverty background, I always had kind of a real concern about not having enough money to live because of my past. And one of his houses, it didn't go into foreclosure, but we had to sell it at a huge loss, and we ended up having to move. Anyways, it's a long story.
Uh-huh.
But as I was stressing out over this and just kind of praying about it, again, that kind of voice was like, Diana, I will always take care of you.
Mm.
Don't worry. I will always take care of you. And I was like, well, okay. And so that was definitely a time. And I think back on that many, many times. It was like, you get these little tender mercies in your life, right? Little
Yeah.
tender mercies that, God throws you a lifeline, and he's like, I know you've been through really bad stuff. So here's, don't,
Yeah.
don't worry. I got you. I got you.
Right. That voice, that's so powerful. I have similar experiences, but they can be different. Like I might hear a voice, not in my ears, but in my thoughts,
Right.
you know, or something might just make me turn. Like there's no thought, something is making me do it.
Right.
So can you share just sort of what that's like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think the way that comes to me is I'm a big, everybody's kind of talking about meditation these days. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I actually formally meditate, but I'm definitely a ponderer. I ponder a lot of things, and I ponder a long time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like things start to formulate, and evolve. And I think that's how I sometimes get those kinds of answers. But sometimes they come like I'm in the shower and I just get a thought like, oh, this is a thought that just kind of jumped into my mind.
Yeah.
I heard you talk on one of your podcasts about your mom,
Mm-hmm.
and how, you feel like she's still close by. And
Yeah.
it's that kind of a feeling. It's like, you can't exactly explain exactly what it is, but you just kind of know that it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like I know when she's there, like I feel it. and then I know when she's just in my thoughts.
Right.
When she passed away, like she passed away at like 1 a.m. And so the next night, say that was like 1 a.m. Friday morning. So the next night, my brothers had come in town and a few friends were over and we're in the living room. And my girlfriends and I, two girlfriends and I are sitting at the table, the dining room table, and my brothers are across the room. And my mom, we never really talked about this old friend of hers. You know, she had been friends with this person for 50, 60, 70 years. But a voice came to me that said, Adrienne, call Rosemary.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting like I'm sitting right here right now. Just said, Adrienne, call Rosemary.
Right.
And so I'm looking over at my brothers and I'm like, wow, I'm like, they don't know that she's like talking to me right now. And what can I say? Like they won't feel the realness of it if I just say it.
Right.
And I got her number really easily. And she was from Rochester, New York. I'm from Buffalo, but she was actually in Hawaii for an extended period of time. So somehow within 20 minutes, I was able to just get her number in Hawaii and call her.
Yeah.
And it was wild. So like, yeah, a lot of stuff like that.
And whenever in my opinion, whenever you have things like that, where you're like, that was interesting. If you always kind of just look up towards heaven and say, thank you.
Oh, of course. Yes.
You just keep getting more. And then your life becomes filled with those kinds of things where you feel taken care of and guided and directed.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's very reassuring and that love
Comforting.
feeling.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so outside of that, are there moments where you just feel the presence of God, where you just feel like, I'm really feeling God right now? Like you're just like, wow.
I do. I mean, I think I've felt it so many times. I mean, there's a time
when women's giving birth.
For sure. And I remember one of the first times I ever felt it was when I was a little girl and I was just so forlorn. And my father, I had tried to run away when I was 9 years old. And where I thought I was going to go when I was 9 years old, I have no idea. But when they found me, he almost beat me literally to death. And I just wanted to die after that. And I remember just kind of praying kind of in a little girl way, but I really felt this warm, loving kind of embrace when I was laying in my bed, crying my eyes out. I mean, that's the first time I really think I ever felt it, but that was kind of the start of that. Because it comforted me, right? It made me feel like it's, hang in there, little girl. Yeah.
My goodness. So did you ever see or talk to your father again?
Very little. He actually just passed away in this past February. And I had actually sent him an email saying, do you want to touch base? Do you want to, talk before?
Right.
He never apologized. He never was accountable for all of his actions. He always said that my mother was crazy, making everything up. But I was like, how can she possibly make everything up when I sat there and watched it all happen?
Right.
So, yeah, he just never apologized, and he died. And I think he died an old, lonely man.
Yeah. Wow. And your mom, is she still living?
She passed away right before COVID.
Oh my.
Yeah, she passed away, and I have had some similar experience. We could probably talk all day long about it. But I had some similar experiences to what you said about your mom. And, I held my mom in my arms when she passed, and it was peaceful.
Yeah. I just think that's just the biggest blessing we could give to someone. Just like, bringing someone into the world, is an enormous gift and blessing to experience, I would think. And I think, to be able to be there I remember when I said to myself, I've never been with anybody when they left this earth. And then suddenly I was with my mother, my grandmother, and my brother, but it's something to be there with somebody.
Yes, and it's what you just said, birth, like you come into the world,
Yeah,
it's wonderful and it's fantastic. You go out of this world. We don't know what's on the other side of that, but I'm sure that there's just as many people on the other side welcoming them into that world as
exactly.
there are when our little babies come to us, and we're so
Right.
excited to see them in our world, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's got to be the same thing. It has to be.
Yeah, I agree. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about in your family, all the people that have gone before and how excited probably her parents were to see her. And,
Yeah.
I mean, just all the relatives that have gone before
Hmm.
and how excited they are to see, hey, you made it, you made it to this life and hooray. And everybody's cheering for you. And I think it's probably going to be, I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Is this the first book that you are a part of?
Yes, it is. It is. And as I've sat here and written, I've thought, well, I've got a lot of more stories I need to tell.
I'm sure. Stories from a midwife.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's so many stories in that realm for sure.
Do you know how many babies you've delivered? I mean, more than such a number?
Um, I haven't totally kept track, but I'm sure it's a couple thousand.
Is there a particularly memorable experience? I know they all are, something that you would feel okay sharing, just something that was just
Oh yeah, I could share so many stories, but so here's one thing that not very many people know about. So a baby lives in a bag of water, right? They live in a little bag of water. And a lot of people don't realize that a baby can be born inside their bag of water. And so I've done many water births where the mom's in the water and then the baby comes out in the water in their bag of water. And that is also a very cool spiritual experience that is very, it just
makes me
touches
want
your,
to
it just,
cry.
yeah, it just touches your heart. It's just, I mean, it's so beautiful. And it's in those little moments where I just am like, I'm so blessed to be a part of these little moments in people's lives that are so quick, but they're so incredibly special and spiritual. Lots of
Yeah.
them.
And when you say they come out into a bag of water, do you mean like, say, the bag of water being like the body of water that they're in? Or
Yes.
what do you mean? Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they live in a little balloon of water. And so you know
Hmm.
how people say my water broke, or
Yeah.
when the doctor's like, I'm going to break your water, we're
Uh-huh.
popping that little balloon. And
Hmm.
if you don't do that, then the whole balloon with the baby in it comes out. And then you can just kind of pull it away from their face. And then,
Oh, that's what all that stuff is.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. It's like peekaboo, hello. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then those babies just open their big eyes
Oh
and they
my.
look at you like, hey, new world, new exciting
Was
things.
each of your births spectacular? I mean, I guess you can't say no in case your children are listening, but I'm automatically thinking about, your own births.
Well, I had 5 babies in a hospital and then I had 2 babies at home. So
Oh.
the more I did it, the more I was like, I looked at birth as being more spiritual, the more babies I had.
Uh-huh.
So I just kind of started to kind of venture away from the medical model and decided to have a midwife at my house, at my home. And
How old is your youngest and how old is your oldest child?
my oldest is 44 and my youngest is 34. I had 7 children in 10 years.
Oh my.
Yes, I was.
Wow.
Yes. Another thing of being an abused child is trying to prove to everybody that you are worthy. So I'm a total overachiever, and that's totally, pathological, I'm sure. But it's just it's just me. And but I'm so glad, we've had lots of wonderful times together.
I
And
was just about to say it must be a lot of fun times, especially with them being sort of close in age.
yes,
Gosh.
yes. And they're close
Uh,
to each other, they're
yeah.
they're close to each other. So we have a pretty, cool thing.
So if someone wants to get in touch with you, communicate with you in some way, what's the best way?
As of right now, they can just contact me through my Gmail. It's just my name, Diana Buckwalter at Gmail. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have a website that's going to be, for a lot of different things, but a little bit more GYN, OB related. And then another really interest that I have is couples with intimacy issues, because women have so many issues around sex. And so that's kind of become one of my fortes as well. So, So can you share a little about that? I'm sorry, now you got me curious. And I actually saw an interview that you did, a local interview on a local news station that I feel like was related to that a little bit. Yes.
But so what do you chat with women about around that?
Yeah. So back when I was kind of talking a little bit about doing annual exams on women, the number one question I get from women is, where is my sex drive? I have no sex drive. I have no libido. And then tears. And so after talking to women for literally years about this, there's multiple reasons why women have little to no sex drive. And so I just started talking to women, and then I kept giving the same kind of talk over and over and over. And I thought, I need to get this out there, because there's so many women who are struggling with this, and couples, there's actually tons of men who care a whole lot about their women. It's painful to have sex, or, they really struggle. Infertility is such a big issue. And there's so many issues around that intimate part of their lives.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something personal. A few years ago, I went to get an exam, and I didn't have a partner at the time.
Right.
And the nurse, it was a nurse practitioner, I want to say, was telling me I should masturbate, because if you don't use it, you lose it. Those were her exact words. I said, are you telling me that this will close up? And so she basically said, it can all but happen, that, that it just, I don't know what she was saying, scar tissue or what, but she was saying women have to continue to do something. If you don't have a partner, and I think if that's true, I'm curious if you think that's true, but I mean, I think, that's something that women have to need to know. A lot of women do it anyway. I mean, I think it's perfectly good and fine, but some women, especially if maybe it goes against their religion, and they don't think that they should do that at all, or should do that by themselves. So
Adrienne, you've mentioned a very hot topic. There are so many things to say around. We need to do another podcast about that topic.
Okay. There's there you can't.
There's a lot to say about that, because there's, like you said, there's your upbringing.
Yeah.
Your vagina doesn't close up, so to speak, until you're, really old, and it has to do with the estrogen in your body and losing estrogen, and, vaginal dryness. And there's a lot behind what she told you in a very short sentence. But, and there's so many things you can do about all those things too. So if you're a single woman, there's a lot to discuss about that, or a married one. It doesn't even matter,
But that's the key. That's the important thing, what you just said. There's something that you can do about it.
Absolutely.
And it's not like, your life is over, as you know.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Your life is not even over.
Not me, hypothetically.
Absolutely. Yeah, hypothetically, nobody's like, we got you. We got you. Believe me.
But thank you so much. This has been great. And I would love to do a follow-up podcast on anything you'd like to talk about.
You're so sweet. Yeah, I think I have a feeling we could talk for a long time about all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
I got to talk you into being a midwife. I think that sounds like a great idea.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm not against it. I just feel like, I maybe need to know some things,
Yes,
like I
yes,
said.
absolutely. Well,
Wow.
thank you so much, Adrienne. I've enjoyed talking with you so much.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all of our episodes on traditional podcast platforms. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Let's start healing.